Welcome. It's 6:30 and I think most people are in, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to United Policyholders County of El Paso Roadmap to Recovery meeting. My name is Karen Remus and I'm the Disaster Recovery Aid Outreach and Education Coordinator for UP, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here with you tonight, and I hope the information that we share will be useful for you. I did want to direct your attention briefly to our agenda. We generally try to stay fairly closely to this, just so I know time is precious for you. There's not enough hours in the day, what with living life, managing a wildfire claim, raising kids, trying to keep a job. I know that firsthand, so we try to stay on track. We're going to have at least one brief edition. One of your own, Carrie Olivia, is very kind, is going to come up after our substantive presentation and give you a legislative update on the homeowners insurance reform legislation. So I thank her in advance for doing that, and I'll call her up a little bit later to do that. What we do is we tend to wait and hold our Q&A after we're completely through, so I hope that's okay with everybody. So we're going to come straight through our presentation, and then if you have any questions on any of the parts of the presentation, we have a significant Q&A period afterwards. You can come up to the mics and ask any questions you have. So and with that, we're going to go ahead and just start moving through. About United Policyholders, I think some of you might be familiar with our organization, maybe some not. UP is a nonprofit 501c3 charity funded by donations and grants. Most of our work gets done by volunteers, a lot of previous catastrophic loss survivors that are now recovered, as well as many consumer-oriented, friendly professionals, for which we're very grateful. Our website, www.unitedpolicyholders.org or www.uphelp.org, they go to the same webpage, is a really great resource of free online information. And all of our work and all of our resources are free to fire survivors and consumers. What brought me to you here tonight is going through a very similar experience as you are going through right now. On October 26, 2003, our house burned to the ground in the Cedar Fire, which is the largest wildfire in California state history. And it really launched an experience that changed my life in a lot of different ways, not the least of which was a real frustration with the insurance recovery process. I chatted with a couple of you beforehand, and I think probably like many of you, I had been somewhat erroneously under the impression that you have a total loss and you're insured and they write you a check, and that isn't exactly how it went, to say the least. And so luckily I found United Policyholders as I was trying to recover, my husband and I, and it was a great information resource in our own recovery. So when I got back to my rebuilt home in 2005, I started volunteering, and periodically will come on staff to help out. And it's, it was definitely, I always say it's like the club that we all belong to that nobody wanted to join. So, to say the least. But that's what really brought me to you here today. Our recovery tools and resources, we have quite a few. Some of you may already have some of these, some of you may not, but I just wanted to make sure you knew about them. The Disaster Recovery Handbook, also known as the Little Yellow Book, is kind of like an insurance recovery Bible. I had this. I actually still have my one at home in my cabinet. I'm never getting rid of that sucker, but I had my own when I was going through my recovery myself. It was a previous version. This one's better, frankly. So again, if you haven't gotten this, keep in mind that all of our resources are available by just emailing info@uphelp.org, and they will mail those out to you if you are a fire loss survivor. Our recovery flash drive, which I think, again, many of you received at the Personal Property Inventory Workshop and also at the Long-Term Recovery Center where they've been distributing these. The Personal Property Inventory flash drive really has a lot of useful things on it related to your personal property claim. There's a sample, a sample completed inventory that you can use as a memory jogger, for example. There's a depreciation tip sheet. There's all sorts of just useful things to help you through that very onerous task. So again, preloaded with all content related to the personal property claim. Keep in mind that if for whatever reason you don't have one of these, you can't get one of these, although we'll send you one, everything that's on here is available on the UP website, all right? So again, everything that's on this is available on the UP website. Finally, we have a claim organizer. And again, claim organizers, just to try and help you stay organized, keep organized with reference to the claim. You guys are, almost, about 10 months in here or so. So many of you may already have kind of like an organized system, maybe a file box or an organizer like this. But if you need one, again, all you have to do is email us. It's divided into sections to help you, segregate the different portions of your claim, have a claim diary going. There's business card holders and whatnot just to help you stay organized. Additional resources that are available to you, number one, our Ask an Expert online forum. You might be like, what is that? It's as it says. If you have a moment where there's not a meeting coming up like this where you have people you can ask, but you're like, oh my gosh, I have this question related to something in my recovery process, my insurance recovery process. Ask an Expert is an online forum administered through United Policyholders where you can direct a question literally to a plaintiff policyholder attorney, a professional claims handler, or a previous catastrophic loss survivor like myself. We have over 150 previous catastrophic loss survivor volunteers within our organization. And so it's just a good free resource if you're like, what's somebody else's opinion on this? Maybe get a, I like to use the term data point. Anybody who knows me knows I use that term. It's like another data point if you're trying to get information on a particular topic related to the insurance recovery. Finally, our Disaster Survivor Support Network, which is basically our network of those previous 150 cat loss survivors. A combination of totals, some partials. We have far more totals than partials, but we have a lot of our totals, and we do have partial loss survivors who are available to speak with you. They don't provide any sort of legal advice, but they're there to lend a sympathetic ear. They've been there, and they have come out the other side. They're like me. They've been there, they've walked it, and they've made it to the end of that journey. And so sometimes when you're in the middle of it, and believe me, being here with you, I mean, I feel it. I remember what it was like sitting here, like 9 years ago in this, circumstance. It's kind of nice to maybe talk to somebody and for them to be reality-based, be able to say to you, like, it's gonna end. It has a different resonance than somebody who hasn't been through it saying it to you. And they might be able to give you some tips, some ideas, strategies for getting through it. It always helps to hear different people and different ideas. So again, they're always there to offer some encouragement, a listening ear, and some encouragement. Our fine print, because of course, our executive director and myself are both lawyers, there you have it. Our information in this program is for general education purposes only, not construed as legal advice. All of our speakers are volunteering their time as educators, and I thank our guest speaker here tonight as well. Neither UP or County of El Paso endorse or warrant the quality of services of any of our volunteer speakers. Yay, there we go. All right, for more information, definitely please visit our website, www.unitedpolicyholders.org or www.uphelp.org. Again, tremendous source of free, consumer-friendly insurance recovery information. All right, we've got multiple topics that we're covering tonight. Oh, before I do that, let me do our thank you. Really want to say thank you to the Denver Foundation for funding us to come here. Definitely El Paso County in general, Commissioner Sally Clark, Brian Olson, who I met today, wonderful Waldo women, Carrie Oliver, Carla Price, Gary Sanfason from Boulder County, Steve Price, who had great pleasure again speaking with earlier, Scott DeLuise and Chris Rockers from Matrix Business Consulting, Matt Andrews, your fire recovery manager here, and to your elected representatives for their hard work on the insurance reform legislation. But again, we don't come here by ourselves. We come here in partnership, and we're very grateful to all of these partners and joining up with us to bring this to you. All right, so we're going to start with the one-year fire anniversary and a topic that's very near and dear probably to many of you and may be an issue for many of you, which is expiration of ALE benefits. All right, many of you may now be facing expiration, impending expiration of ALE benefits. Homeowners insurance policies can contain various ALE benefit limitations, including but certainly not limited to any of these and or a combination of them. Limiting ALE benefits to the shortest time needed to rebuild not to exceed 12 months or other stated time limit, so it could be 12 months or perhaps another stated time limit such as 2 years. Limiting ALE benefits solely to the shortest reasonable time for you to rebuild without any other specific time limitation, that's a common provision, and or limiting ALE benefits to a certain capped dollar amount. So again, it could be any of those three or a combination, like you could have a time limit plus a capped dollar amount. Any of those would be very common ALE provisions. So that's the hard thing too about these claims. These are not one-size-fits-all solutions. You know, your policies have unique differences, even sometimes amongst the same carrier, depending on when it was written. So again, you know, reading your policy is an important first step. Again, you guys are some time in, but if you have not done this, it's an important strategy. Make sure that you have a complete copy of the entire policy, including all endorsements, declarations, and riders. Again, most of you probably have this by now, but just to be on the safe side, if you don't, you should request one. The other thing that you need to do is make sure that you have read it. I know it reads like gobbledygook, and you might be like, God, I've been reading it for 10 months, it still reads like gobbledygook, lady. I know that that may be the case. You stick with it, the little yellow book will help in terms of understanding it. But unless you take the time to go through, it's kind of like playing poker blindfolded. You know what I'm saying? The other person has all the cards, and you're kind of trying to do it without any information. It can be really helpful if you haven't done it already to make a photocopy and then make a working copy, one that you write all over and you write your notes on, your questions, things that you're unsure about. That can be a helpful strategy. Okay, if you need to request an extension of ALE benefits, it's important that you do it in writing. All right, so if you need to request an extension of your ALE benefits, do it in writing. When you do it in writing, make sure that you ask for a written response from your insurance company within a defined and reasonable amount of time. So you wouldn't want to send an open-ended request for extension of benefits. Do something like, you know, where you write this nice letter and you're like, you know, I really need it, you lay out some reasons, and then that's it. Any time that you send a letter, so this is some good, just effective claims communication tips for you. Anytime you send a letter to your insurance company asking them to do something or answer a question, always give them a time period, all right? And it needs to be commercially reasonable. You know, again, they have to be reasonable. You've got to be reasonable, right? Thank you for responding in writing within 2 weeks of the date of this letter. Thank you for responding in writing within 10 days of the date of this letter. In terms of tone, the most useful tone that you can use when communicating with your insurance company in writing or frankly otherwise would be polite assertiveness. Polite assertiveness, all right? Given that we're coming upon the 1-year anniversary, it's completely understandable that probably tensions, stress, frustration for some of you may be rising. It's a very stressful process. You know, I know everybody said this to you, and I'm sure you're finding it to be true. I know I did. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You want to be extremely thoughtful about not using the insurance company as an emotional venting board. That does no good for you in your claim. And even though it might be tempting if you're experiencing something that makes you frustrated, remaining politely assertive and remembering that this is a business transaction will be very useful to you in terms of moving this claim forward effectively. I think the hard thing in that regard is that even though you know it's a business transaction, it doesn't feel like a business transaction because it's your home. And it has a very different feel for that reason. And it's easy to, you know, lose track of that. For them, they do this every day. This is their, you know, this is their line of work, and it's got a very different feel for you. It's much more personal. But you want to always, in those written communications and otherwise, maintain that tone. And the most useful tone that we have found works, polite assertiveness, all right? So what you want to do then, again, if you need to request an extension, do it in writing. Ask for a response within a specified amount of time, all right? And state the reasons for requesting the extension of ALE benefits. It's probably not going to be very persuasive. If you just say, like, may I have an extension for my ALE benefits, I would surmise it would be unlikely that you would get a positive response from most insurers on that. Maybe if you're lucky, I don't know, got a nice adjuster, but typically you want to be more specific in that. You want to state the reasons. All right, reasons for seeking an extension of ALE benefits. And let me just say that this is not only for ALE benefits, but any extension that you may need at this time. Some of you might need an extension for collection of RCV benefits. Some of you might need an extension to get your personal property submission, inventory submission in. There's any of a number of deadlines that may be coming upon you depending on how your policy is written. So again, these same strategies apply, all right? Well, for seeking extension of AOE benefits, what's probably going to be amongst the most persuasive, if not the most persuasive? Likely the most persuasive would be that the insurance company delayed the claim, and that's why you need the extension. Do you see what I'm saying? That again, that if you can document that, and that may be true for some of you, it may not be true for some of you, but if that is what has caused the delay, that will likely be the most persuasive to them in terms of being willing to grant an extension, all right? Additionally, substantiated explanation of personal circumstances. Why is it? So instead of just saying like, can I have an extension of AOE benefits or any other timeline that you might need, why is it that you need that? Is it that you've been devoting 40 hours a week to the personal property inventory? Is it that you've been trying to hold down your full-time job, raise your 3 children? Or, whatever it is, I would just encourage you to be candid about, have there been weather delays? Gee, there have been weather delays, or I experienced a delay in some part of the process that you can document. The more substantiated and documented that you can get, the more persuasive it is. All right, so again, listing those out. Going back to that first reason, so now I'm going to elaborate on that. Did the insurance company cause delays? Well, what you want to do, and hopefully this is something you've been doing, and if you haven't, I'm going to talk to you about it briefly right now, and it's something you should start. Refer to your claim diary. Each of you should, to the extent that sanity and time permit, be keeping a claim diary. What is a claim diary? A claim diary is basically just, like your notes on what was said, what was promised, what has gone on. You speak with the adjuster, and the adjuster says, oh, you have all the time in the world to submit your AOE, receipts. You jot that down. In the best of all possible worlds, you not only jot that down in your claim diary, but you confirm it back in writing. Creating a paper trail, first of all, through your claim diary, and also by confirming promises, representations in writing is a really important strategy in moving the claim forward. So again, that's something that you really want to get in the habit of. I remember somebody telling me that shortly after my house burned down. I was like, you have got to be kidding. Like, I don't even have time. My hair's not washed, and I haven't taken a shower. I'm supposed to be keeping a flippin' claim diary? You know what? You do the best that you can. You do the very best that you can under the circumstances, I think mine was like in a spiral notebook, and I think at first it was on some scraps of paper, candidly. But you always just do the best that you can do, giving the time and the bandwidth that you have, all right? And if applicable, again, so you refer to your claim diary, you want to detail any specific instances of insurance company delay and accordingly why your AOE benefits should be extended. Again, that is likely going to be the most persuasive reasoning, albeit not the only one, but likely amongst the most persuasive reasonings that you can use to ask for an extension. Also, I would say, remember, you can also exert public pressure on insurance companies to extend AOE benefits. The 1-year fire anniversary is very fast approaching, and I'm going to tell you right now, there will be media coverage of that. That's not even a question. There will be media coverage of it. Media coverage presents you as a coordinated, cohesive group of fire survivors with an opportunity to draw attention to insurance recovery-related obstacles that you are facing, including for some of you, inadequate AOE benefits. It's an opportunity to, again, shine the light on that and try to create some public pressure to, hey, get some of these extended. Other fire survivor communities, again, have, shined a light, and sometimes with effect. For example, Witch Creek fire survivors, this was a devastating wildfire in 2007. They held a press conference in 2008 on their 1-year fire anniversary, drawing attention to not only AOE benefits, but a wide variety of insurance recovery-related obstacles they were facing to, again, shine a spotlight and to create some inertia and to get some movement on some of these claims. And again, that's just an additional strategy that you guys can contemplate. That press conference was covered on the front page of the business section of the LA Times. And again, so sometimes having that media coverage, really illuminating these issues. I mean, I'm sure many of you, or at least some of you right now, may have neighbors or friends who are starting to say, like, why aren't you rebuilt yet? It's almost a year. I mean, that started happening. I remember that distinctly. And I don't think sometimes people realize, unless they've gone through it personally, how extensive this process is. And that's a real understatement, to say the least, that how much is involved, that you really have multiple mini claims within here. You've got your structure, your personal property, like you said, all these mini claims that you're trying to move all of them forward. So again, trying to exert some public pressure, have some media coverage to, again, shine a light on some of these challenges you're facing can be yet another strategy in trying to get those insurance companies to extend either benefits, deadlines, etc. So again, some strategies there for you. I'm going to do now, and I think I'm running just even slightly ahead of schedule, which is always a pleasure, is I'm going to introduce now our guest speaker, Tom Henderson, who's going to be talking about legal issues and the suit against us clause, most particularly with the 1-year fire anniversary. All right, Tom, let me do the transfer to you. Okay. So just want to click forward. There we go.
Good evening, everybody. Some of you I've met before. My name is Tom Henderson, and I'm an attorney from Denver, and part of what I volunteer to do for United Policyholders is to come and speak to groups of fire survivors such as yourself. One thing that Karen did not mention is that she and I were both up in Fort Collins last night speaking to High Park fire survivors, and so we're making quite the circuit here. Karen, though, is from California, so she was rather white-knuckled. She acknowledged to me in the driving last night through the blizzard that we endured. So I'm going to talk tonight about the 1-year suit limitation clause, and I entitled this talk, Beware the Suit Limitation Clause, because it is something that typically is buried within your insurance policy that the insurance companies oftentimes do not want you to pay attention to. First, let me speak a little bit about me, my firm, what we do. The firm I'm with is called Berg Simpson. We have over 35 years of experience in the Rocky Mountain region. We have 25 lawyers in our Denver office. The Simpson part of Berg Simpson is the former U.S. Senator from Wyoming, Alan Simpson. So his family continues to practice law up in Cody, Wyoming. So we have an outpost up there. We also have an outpost in Cincinnati. Myself, I have 25 years experience doing insurance litigation. And one of the things that makes me somewhat unique is the fact that the first 20 years of my practice, that's where all these gray hairs came from, was spent working for the insurance companies. And so I like to say I know how they think. Oftentimes I can outmaneuver them to get to points that they haven't figured out they need to get to yet, because I already know the path there, so I can try to block it to the extent possible. It's not always possible. Now I work exclusively for policyholders, insureds who have suffered losses, whether it be on a catastrophic wide basis, such as you all experienced, or in an isolated instance. And I specialize in what is called in the law first-party insurance. That's making claims against your own insurance policy. The juxtaposition is third-party insurance, which is liability coverage typically, whereas if somebody rear-ends you on I-25, you turn around and you need to make a claim against that person, it's that person's insurance company, so it's not someone that you contracted with. Because it is a first-party insurance company, and my topic tonight is not bad faith, but because it is a first-party insurance company, they owe you duties. They owe you, the insured. You are the ones that have paid the premium, whether it be for 1 day or for 30 years to the same company. They owe you duties, and the duties are to treat you in good faith and to deal with you fairly. Typically, we refer to it by the converse, which is bad faith. I've tried, well, this is just a little something about me. I have a good experience. All right, the sources of your legal rights. There's essentially two main sources of your legal rights with respect to insurance companies. One is the contract. That's the policy. And that's what sets forth what are the benefits that the insurance company owes you as a result of the catastrophe that befell you. That's also where the suit against us clause lies, which is in the contract itself. The second place where your rights can be found is in law, whether it's case law, whether it's statutes. Colorado does have a statute called the Unfair Claims Practices Act, and that's kind of one of the, frankly, it's kind of the Bible that I go by when I'm looking at trying to assert politely to the insurance company where it is that they've gone wrong. For instance, the Unfair Claims Practice Act in Colorado requires insurance companies have to tell you, they have to explain to you the basis of every payment that they make. If they have not done so, just go back to them and say, I don't understand what this payment was for that you sent me. Even if it was a payment right off the bat, they may have called it an advance. Ask them to please explain to you what was the basis for that payment. And there's a host of other requirements that insurance companies must follow in the Unfair Claims Practices Act. There also are insurance regulations, and there are bulletins. Bulletins are something that, there is a bulletin on the back of your agenda. Insurance companies are not required to follow bulletins. That's merely the Division of Insurance's interpretation of law. They are required to follow regulations. All right. The suit against us clause, really what that is frankly, it's almost like a limited warranty. When you go buy a product, limited warranties are always required to be put in boldface type, bigger type than the rest of the agreement or the contract, and not be buried deep within a bunch of legalese. Well, that doesn't apply to insurance companies, so guess where that suit against us clause is typically found. It's usually, if your policy is 15, 20 pages long, it's usually among the last couple of pages, and it's usually in an area called general conditions or additional conditions. Again, nothing that springs out at you that, oh my goodness, there's probably some dangers that are lurking here. The typical suit against us clause, or sometimes it's called sometimes it's buried within the cooperation clause, but it's suit against us, or if you sue us clause, says words similar to the following. And I don't remember anymore if I took this out of a state farm policy or farmer's policy. It was probably one of those two. But all of the insurance companies have very, very similar language. No suit or action may be brought against us unless there has been full compliance with all policy terms. Okay, I have strong confidence that all of you have been diligent in terms of working your claims and doing what they have asked you to do. It's the next part that is the catch. Any suit or action must be brought within 1 year after the inception of the loss or damage. Now, not every policy, not every company uses 1 year. Some use 2 years. Some, frankly, don't even have limitations. Most have 1 year. And let me draw your attention to the part where it says inception of loss or damage. That's when the fire burned down your home. If you are still in negotiations with the insurance company, or you finally reached loggerheads with the insurance company a month or two ago, the 1 year does not start from that date. It starts from the date of the fire. And I'll share with you a war story for two of my clients who were involved in the Lower North Fork fire in a moment. And the Lower North Fork fire was the fire that was started by the Colorado State Forest Service up near Conifer, and it was a controlled burn that then got out of control and killed 3 people, as well as caused horrific damage, all at the hands of the state deciding to take a day off in their monitoring of this controlled burn. These types of suit limitation clauses are enforceable under Colorado law, even if they're shorter than what the statute of limitation would otherwise be. Generally, Colorado law says that if someone breaches a contract, which is what the policy is, you get 3 years to sue them from the date of the breach. There's been a long history of Colorado cases as far back as 1955, that Colorado Supreme Court case there, saying, nope, it's a contract that you willingly entered into, as if you had some say over what was in these clauses, but this is a contract that you willingly entered into, and so you're going to be bound by it. If it says you have to sue them within 1 year, then guess what? You have to sue them within 1 year, even though that is shorter than the statute of limitation. Now, at one of the other speakers tonight, I know, is going to come up and address a new piece of legislation that is on a razor's edge of being on Governor Hickenlooper's desk, which will hopefully be of some relief to you folks in this regard, because it is going to say, unless it gets changed between now and when Governor Hickenlooper signs it, which is still a possibility, it is going to say that insurance companies can no longer try to shrink down the period shorter than what the statute of limitation would otherwise be. But don't count on that happening for your own sake. Again, enforced from the inception of loss or damage, and Colorado has not recognized a different time trigger date. Some states, I know California for one, that 1 year suit limitation, doesn't matter what the contract says, it does not begin to run until you've reached loggerheads. Yes?
Do you have to, my insurance company the other day said I just had to get my inventory list and stuff in by that date, and then they had time after that to settle. Is that correct?
I'm going to go ahead and jump forward to address your question, because it's an excellent question that does not only apply to inventories. There are many policies out there, including a lot of State Farm policies and others, who actually give you a longer period of time than 1 year to replace your house or replace your contents. There are State Farm policies and others that give you 2 years, but they still have the 1 year suit limitation clause. So what are you to do? What are you to do if you don't even have a dispute with them yet? And this is the war story that I said I was going to share with you, which is I have a couple of clients in the lower North Fork fire, insured by State Farm. They have 2 years to replace their dwelling, 2 years to replace their personal property, their contents, but a 1 year suit limitation clause. And that fire was on March 26 of 2012, and then beginning in about early February, I politely and assertively went to State Farm and said, hey, State Farm, we don't really even have any disputes with you right now, but we might. We might after the 1 year is up. Would you please consider extending this suit limitation clause, or tolling, that's a legal term for delay, the suit limitation clause, and, to at least the same 2 year period that they have to replace? And one of these claims is one of the death claims. And I represent the surviving family members of the death claims. And the very polite adjuster said, oh, have been very concerned about that claim, we know all about it, et cetera, but golly, I don't have the ability to rewrite the contract. I have to go up the ladder. I said, okay, that's fine. Go ahead and go up the ladder. Up the ladder it goes, back down the ladder it comes. No. We will not agree to extend this. We will not agree to rewrite our contract. Okay, so I guess you want me to sue you. So I turned around and I sued him. And I sued him alleging that they have not yet paid out the replacement cost that I believe that they will owe. And we'll probably end up having to fight that out at some point as to whether or not that's a viable claim. But it's absolutely, keep my language clean here, but absolutely ridiculous that an insurance company would take that kind of position. So there are more than one timelines, as Karen mentioned, more than one timelines that you have to be mindful of complying with in an insurance policy. There may be a 1-year suit limitation clause. There might be 1 year to replace your dwelling. There might be 1 year to replace your contents. All those 1 year periods operate independent of each other. So if you're asking for an extension, ask for an extension of all the requirements. Your question, ma'am, is an excellent one, which is the insurance company's going to say, well, now we need time to consider this lengthy, 30, 40, 50-page long inventory that you've submitted to them. And what happens if they don't get back to you within the 1 year? Or what happens if they offer to get back to you, very shortly before? Well, you need to be politely assertive, but you need to be pinging them, reminding them, hey, I've got this 1 year suit limitation clause coming up. Gee, I'm really concerned about this passing. If you need more time, that's fine, but please then consider extending that suit limitation clause. And many insurers will agree to extend that suit limitation clause, but there are others, such as State Farm, who do not, under any or seemingly under any circumstances. So don't allow yourself to be lulled to sleep by virtue of the fact the insurance company says, well, gee, now, and you guys are nearly 10 months out, right? Gee, you're only submitting your claim now, or now you're giving us another supplement, trying to make you feel like you're the wrongdoer here, that it took you so long. And now we need time to consider it, so says the insurance company. Well, they may be, far be it from me to ever cast aspersions here, but they may be trying to bait you into letting that 1 year time frame go on by, and you haven't yet protected your rights. All right, there are exceptions to the 1 year suit limitation clause. It does not apply to bad faith claims. As a lawyer, I never want to rely only on a bad faith claim. I also want to rely on a breach of contract claim. So I always want to have a client come to me before the expiration of that suit limitation clause. Bad faith claims are claims based in tort, not in contract. And so the basic tort statute of limitation applies, which is 2 years from the date that they torted you or the date that they wronged you in terms of violating their covenant of good faith and fair dealing. Other types of claims, including outrageous conduct, also are subject to the tort statute of limitation of 2 years. Another exception, although exceedingly difficult to prove, and the next couple of slides are going to address these, is the so-called satisfactory excuse. What you'll quickly see, though, is seldom is an excuse satisfactory. The legal theories there are estoppel and waiver. To establish estoppel, which is, quote, not favored in the law, that comes right out of a Colorado Supreme Court case, so that tells you right there they're not going to be looking very favorable on any request that, oh, golly, please don't enforce this against us. You're essentially, what as lawyers you call, throwing yourself on the mercy of the court. The insurance company knew the pertinent facts. The most difficult factor to prove that the insurance company intended that its conduct be relied upon, or that the policyholder's reasonable person had a right to believe that the conduct was so intended. I would imagine that almost every single one of you, very shortly after the fire, received a letter from your insurance company. It was probably the very first letter. If it wasn't the first one, it was among the first 2 or 3, purporting to be very friendly. Hi, we're sorry for your loss, and the adjuster's going to be coming to your house soon, etc. And then it's filled with 3 or 4 pages of quotations from the policy. Oftentimes, one of the quotations from the policy is that suit against us clause. Well, at that point in time, that's one of the furthest possible things from your mind. You're barely holding it together, trying to put your life together, trying to figure out what do I need to do to get some money from this insurance company so that I can at least go out and have some clothing to wear or be able to go replace some of the school supplies for my kids. You're not paying attention to the suit limitation clause. But the insurance company will point to that letter. If you try to say that the insurance company intended that its conduct be relied upon, or as a reasonable person you had a right to believe that their conduct was so intended, Insurance company is going to point to that letter and say, hey, we've been saying since the very beginning, reminding you about the suit limitation clause. Policyholder was ignorant of the true facts, and policyholder reasonably relied on the insurance company's conduct to the policyholder's detriment. Those are not usually the problem factors, because obviously you wouldn't be in this position if you weren't relying on them. And what are the types of situations that we're talking about? We're talking about situations just as what you described, which is the insurance company says, please get us more information, please get us more information, please get us more information, and then you keep giving them more information, and they say, oh, well, we need more time to consider it, and well, would you accept this, or how about this? And you say, no, that's not enough, you're offering me half X, all I want is to be fully and fairly compensated, 100% X, please. And so you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and this one-year time clock is continuing to tick, 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 tick. That is not, there's been some Colorado cases that find in that situation, you are probably not reasonable to rely on that as a basis to claim that the insurance, that you had a reasonable basis to rely on the insurance company's conduct to not think that the one-year suit limitation clause was going to apply. So, the odds are stacked against you. To establish waiver, and that was the other part of a justifiable excuse. Policyholder must show the insurance company voluntarily relinquished a known right. Good luck on that. You will have an exceedingly difficult time trying to get the insurance company to voluntarily relinquish anything, let alone confessing that they really meant for their conduct to be relied upon in terms of not enforcing the one-year suit limitation clause. So, to sum up that part of the argument, these are very difficult, challenging cases to prove, to try to show that you should not be subject to the one-year suit limitation clause, particularly because of that reservation of rights letter verbiage, and that's that first letter that I told you about where they, chocked it full of policy language. So even, and as I said before, even an ongoing investigation by the insurance company or ongoing settlement negotiations are probably not going to be enough. So do not run the risk. Do not wait for the governor to sign this piece of legislation, because if the governor does not sign the piece of legislation before the one-year anniversary of your fire, which there's no telling that because the legislature recesses, last time I checked, I think it's on schedule to recess May 8th. Of course, that doesn't mean that the governor is going to be signing everything right then. Oftentimes the governor will continue to sign bills as time passes. But if the governor does not sign this current House bill before the expiration of the one-year statute, or the one-year suit limitation clause, then you all will be out in the cold if you haven't yet received an extension from the insurance company. So, mark that 1 year. I'm sure you don't really need to mark it on your calendar, but make sure that if the 1 year anniversary falls on a weekend, that you pencil in that Friday before as the last day, that if they don't give you an extension, you want to make sure that a lawsuit is filed to preserve your rights. So, how about this getting the 1 year extension? And Karen already briefly mentioned it, and there is a form letter, the sample letter, a template letter that you can use. I believe that was one of the handouts up top. And there is no guarantee of success. As I already shared with you, one of my clients who I thought had a very compelling case to get an extension, and the insurance company told them no. But start now. Don't wait. Don't delay. Don't wait until a week before. Don't wait until a month before. Start now, asking for that extension of the 1 year suit limitation clause. Really, the way I typically try to frame it is I'm trying to give you, Mr. Insurance Company, the benefit of the doubt so that I don't have to sue you. I'm trying to help you. Do it in writing, as Karen mentioned. No harm in initially raising it by telephone, but then confirm it in an email or confirm it in writing. And again, always ask the insurance company to confirm back to you that they agree with you in writing, and give them their own time deadline. Say, within 2 weeks, I would like to hear from you as to whether or not you will agree to extend the suit limitation clause. If you don't get the insurance company's agreement, you better file your lawsuit. So, in addition, keep an eye on the 1 year or other stated time limitation for repairing or rebuilding your dwelling or home, or for replacing your contents in personal property. One thing also to keep in mind is there are options sometimes to replace your dwelling at a different location. And oftentimes the insurance company will require that you have completed that purchase within 1 year. If you end up running into some snafus with respect to completing that purchase within 1 year, go to the insurance company now and start stating your case. I have a case, a 4 Mile Canyon case, where a client of mine was insured by American Family, and they insisted that he have replaced his home within 1 year. And he had decided he did not want to move back up into the 4 Mile Canyon area, which was basically a bunch of, it was a lunarscape with a lot of dark sticks. And so he decided he wanted to live somewhere else. And the house that he decided he wanted to buy was a bank foreclosure. When you get foreclosed on, the owner that got foreclosed on typically gets a period of time after the foreclosure, after the sheriff's sale happens, they call it the right of redemption or the period of redemption, to come back and say, okay, now I found some money and I can pay you back. Until that period of redemption expires, the title does not pass to the bank, so the bank can't in turn sell the property. So my client was awaiting that expiration of the period of redemption, had a signed contract with the bank. Here's what I have agreed to purchase the house for. Here's when I will close, which is a date after the redemption period. Took that to American Family, and American Family said, well, no, you didn't replace within 1 year, even though the date of the contract was before 1 year. Unfortunately or fortunately, he didn't come to me until after all that happened, and then I got involved, and fortunately, per a letter I got just last week, even American Family, who I've done some battle with, seems to be softening and seems to be inclined to agree that they will consider paying my client the money that he deserves because he happened to close 5 weeks after the 1 year anniversary. Time limits for additional living expense too, and obviously you've already heard Karen talk about that. The Division of Insurance Bulletin, which is on the back side of your agenda for tonight. And this is a bulletin that you can point to with the insurance company. Again, bulletins are not law, and the insurance company will be the first to remind you of that fact. But the bulletins, this particular bulletin was brought into being after the 4 Mile Canyon fire, because so many people were having such a problem getting everything together and replaced within 1 year. And so the bulletin itself basically encourages insurance companies. It does not tell the insurance companies, thou shalt. It encourages the insurance companies to consider, particularly in mass disaster situations like you all have suffered from. It encourages them to extend the ALE time, to extend the period of time that you have to complete your inventories and the like. So if you make reference, and in the form letter here, which I helped United Policyholders draft, unique to Colorado, I do make reference to that bulletin, and the insurance company hopefully will pay attention to that. So beware the suit limitation clause. It is a very, very real, important deadline. Do not ignore it. Do not just hope for the best. A highly qualified and experienced insurance attorney is a must if you're going to go to battle with an insurance company. Many lawyers out there may dabble in it, But if they don't know the ins and outs of how all these policies fit together, you're going to be perhaps at the wrong end of the learning curve of that particular attorney. And those are just the taglines of my firm. We're fighters for justice, we're good lawyers changing lives. And I want to thank all of you for allowing me to come and speak to you tonight. I will hang around afterwards to answer any questions.
Thanks, Tom. And then let me grab the mic from you. Sorry. I'm going to tag team that mic. All right, thank you. All right, so now we're going to make a transition. We've had a lot of information about, the legal issues of the one-year anniversary, potentially expiring deadlines of various types. Again, the template letter, which is up there, also available on the UP website. And again, Tom, thank you. Tom not only helped create the original one, but our amended one after the amended bulletin came out from Dora. So thank you for that effort on UP's behalf, Tom. So we're going to change our tone a little bit, and we're going to move now into kind of the social emotional component of the one-year fire anniversary. So some pragmatics and now kind of some tugging from the heart. As Tom mentioned, we did this presentation last night in Fort Collins, and I have to tell you, a couple of times I got a little choked up, and it just goes to show, like 10 years out, it can still kind of pull at you a little. So I'm going to hope I hold a little bit tighter tonight. But it's interesting how you're just kind of going along. Even I'm sure you have many days right now where you're just like, oh, it's all going good, and I'm making progress. And then all of a sudden something happens. Maybe you saw something that you had that is, in a store. That used to happen to me, and I'd be like, oh, it's an interesting dynamic, and it can be very challenging. Let me just start off by saying this, is that anniversaries have a dynamic all of their own, or kind of put another way, you can run but you can't hide. I'd heard that, people had told me that when my own home went down, and those people were correct, as I'm going to just bear testament to. By the time we hit our one-year anniversary, we had actually settled with our insurance company. Yay, that was a good moment. And we'd hired our builder, we were underway. So really pragmatically, I remember thinking to myself, it's good, the house is being built. And yet on the morning of the one-year fire anniversary, as I was driving down the street of my community, all of a sudden I looked at the clock on my car, and it was the time that I knew that my house had burned down. It was 8:30 a.m. And all of a sudden, there those tears came. And here I was like, oh, we're good. And it just backed right up on me. And so not to wish that on you, but I would just say, allow that to yourself. And if it does, just allow yourself to have that emotion, and it's very natural and it's normal, and just permit that to yourself and be very kind to yourself. I wasn't anticipating it at all, and sure enough, it came and it got me. I would say don't compare, or try not to. Easier said than done sometimes with others. I don't think anybody is where they wanted to be right now. Are there any, Brian, maybe you know this, are there any COs issued right now in Waldo Canyon? You've got a couple? All right, so there are some people who are back, and the same was true in my fire too. There were a couple people who got in there by the 1 year, and I was like so happy for them. But I would say far more people, at least in my own fire, were not back by the 1 year. Myself, I was 21 months, which was very typical. I remember when my house first burned down, in my first meeting with the extended insurance personnel group and a contractor, and I asked them what's a reality-based estimate for getting back. And I still remember he said 18 months to 3 years. And I remember thinking, like, you got to be kidding me. My daughter was in 2nd grade, and I was thinking, like, she's going to be a 4th grader? Like, what are you talking about? Felt like, right there. And I think with the 1-year fire anniversary, some of that feeling about maybe not being where you wish you were, or where you would like to be, can really rise to the surface, because it's such a notable marker. So again, just, try to be kind to yourself, hold on together, and just try not to compare. Some people do get in early, and it can be tough sometimes to be like, gosh, why aren't I right there as well? Honestly, I think connecting with other fire survivors is going to be one of the most useful strategies for you through this time period. It can be hard, and I alluded to this earlier, I mentioned it earlier, I think it can be really hard for non-fire survivors to really fully grasp the challenges of navigating a catastrophic loss, be it total or partial. or how you're feeling on the anniversary. Again, sometimes for people in the community not living this firsthand, the tone has changed from, hey, how can I help, to like, hey, like, why aren't you rebuilt yet? You know, it's interesting how kind of like it changes. The tone can change sometimes. And sometimes some people maintain that helpfulness all the way through, which is a true blessing. But it doesn't always roll that way in my experience. And it can be hard for non-fire survivors to really get why you're crying on the 1 year, you know, or maybe approaching it. I would say for the first, just for by way of background, for the first 2 fire anniversaries after the loss of my own home, I and most of my neighbors, 322 of us, homes down, we got together, both informally and formally. Much like your wonderful Waldo women, we had a group called the Burnout Sisters in my community. And on the first couple of anniversaries, we did lunch at Pat and Oscar's. With many of us, like we just took out that whole patio, man, and you know, and it was just kind of a sense of communion. Very fortunate for us, our city council member, who, it's interesting how different governmental entities take the lead in different disasters. And our city council member in my community was very proactive, and for the first 2 fire anniversaries, he actually organized a dinner for us on the anniversary. No speech making of any type. He got people to donate food, and it was just an opportunity to come together. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are various anniversary events potentially being organized in your own community, and whether they get organized formally or you pull together as a group informally just to have some companionship, maybe at a park or, you know, at a restaurant or in a patio. I think that that can be a really useful strategy for navigating this time and really kind of journeying through the 1 year fire anniversary from a social emotional component. Oh, this is where I got choked up yesterday, so all right, here we go. Communities acknowledge the fire anniversary in a variety of ways, and I think that can also be a useful strategy in terms of coming through this time. This was one way that my community did it on the 1 year. And it's just, again, just throwing some ideas out there for you guys, and I'm sure you're going to come up with a gajillion ideas that are even better. Most, if not many of us, made thank you posters that we put up on the fence of one of our local schools. And it was our opportunity to say thank you to all those people who had supported us in our community. And we all made very individualized. You'll see this is just one snapshot of these little posters we made. And it was just, I don't know, it felt good to kind of acknowledge back to our community and people. I know you've had many wonderful groups supporting you along this journey to do that. And these were some of, this was my family's. This was our poster that we put up. And, you know, here was another one. This is one of my friends. Her daughter made this. I thought this was hilarious. You know, it was like happy, 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 the day of the fire, and then gradually, you know, very unhappy, and then, oh, it starts getting more happy again. So again, you know, these are some ways that people will just acknowledge the 1 year, and, you know, and it can be helpful. Other strategies I would suggest to you and would be to celebrate along the way. And I think that can be really helpful, not only vis-a-vis navigating the 1 year anniversary and kind of the issues that come up there, but just generally speaking to make it through this process, given its length and, you know, how hard it is, you know, on you. You know, this is a long process, and celebrating along the way can really kind of give you the encouragement to keep on going. You know, here are some examples of other fire communities and things people have done. A groundbreaking party. This is one of our 2007 Firestorm families, and they had a big, you know, get together at their groundbreaking, and it was really just such a good moment to kind of, for everybody who attended, just like, oh, all right, somebody broke ground. You know, maybe it wasn't me, but somebody did. Thank goodness, you know, and it gives you the encouragement to keep going. This is one of my favorite. A number of our fire families in that same fire had like framing, or they call them stud parties, you know, like the studs are in. And what they would do is, that's me at one of those parties, they would have like Sharpie markers, and they would invite people to come and write messages on the framing, because of course it gets covered with the drywall, right? So it's kind of like you imbue the house with goodwill and good wishes and hopeful messages. And it was just really a very cool way. I took a couple copies. Some of them were very thoughtful, you know, well wishes, you know, peace to everybody. This one I thought was hilarious. Some of them were funny, you know, very true statement there. You know, like a Celtic blessing. You know, those are, again, all ideas, different ways that you can try to mark your progress, you know, and again, these are just a few. So again, you know, it's a tough, long process, and that celebrating along the way is a way to not only mark how far you've come, but give you that emotional energy and that gumption to kind of keep on going. One of the recovery groups I belonged to after my own fire, I remember we used to meet about monthly, you know, and it was very low key. It would usually be like a barbecue at our community center. It was very low key, and I remember one of our ringleaders, like every time at that meeting, it was all fire survivors, because non-fire survivors would not get this. Like, he'd be like, all right, he's like, who's started their inventory? Raise your hands. Everybody who started the inventory raised their hands. He's like, all right, okay. Who submitted at least half their inventory? Some people would raise their hand. Way to go, all right, keep going. Okay, who's gotten paid on their inventory? One person raised their hand. But, you know, and everybody would just clap for whatever progress had been made. Like, who's hired a builder? You know, some people would raise their hand. But just that sense of making progress and celebrating it together amongst a group of people who really understand what it's like to go through this process. In terms of, again, I mentioned this earlier, and I want to end here, is, you know, if you want to talk to some other previous catastrophic loss survivors who've been through this process and come out the other side, Disaster Survivor Support Network, again, you can access by sending an email to info@uphelp.org. And again, they're not there for, like I said, legal advice like Tom, but they're there for that empathy, that real life insight. Somebody like myself who's been there, walked through that path and come out the other side. And, you know, like looking at you guys, like I feel it, you know, it just, you know, it's amazing how it comes back looking at you. It's a real long process. And I know some of you are further than others, and it's, you know, it just really, I would say my greatest loss from the fire was not the house, not by a long shot. It was the time. It was the time that fire took. And some of you might have different opinions on that. But personally, I would say what it cost me in terms like the time with my family, the time with my children. But, you know, you just keep on going. And you seek support and encouragement from each other. You're a very cohesive, very inspiring fire survivor community. And I just encourage you to turn to each other, our previous disaster survivors who are also happy to support you and encourage you. What I want to do now is I understand that we do have two of the commissioners here. Carrie wrote me a nice note saying Sally Clark and Peggy Littleton are here. And I just wanted to gratefully acknowledge them. So I don't know if they can stand up, because I don't know what either of them look like. So thank you for standing up. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much thank you so much for your partnership and your encouragement. I was going to pull Carrie up to give a legislative update. Do either of you want to say anything quickly? Okay, great.
I don't know which mics are on, but
There we go. It's
tomorrow night in Manitou Springs, we have another one of our flood preparation meetings. So if any of you have friends or know of folks that would be interested, it starts at 6:30 tomorrow night at Manitou Springs City Hall on Manitou Avenue. So please, you know, let folks know if they want to attend. They're open to the public, so even those of you that may not be directly impacted by flooding but are just interested in information about what's going on in the Waldo Canyon recovery efforts and how we're approaching that, it might be beneficial for you. I thank you so much for being here tonight. Let me know if I can do anything to help. Just email me at the county. We're working really hard to mainly get dollars from the federal government to be able to help us with some of the recovery efforts. And we just really appreciate all of you being here, and certainly I send my thoughts and prayers to all of you that have had some difficult times, and I'm here for you too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. What a privilege to be with all of you tonight. I know I have many friends that are in your same situation, and I still weep with all of them as we go through those times where we see things or remember things. So my heart goes out to you. Sally mentioned if you can't be there tomorrow night or have not made any of the meetings on some of the flood mitigation work that's going on, some of the preparedness work that we're encouraging to do. We have those also on the county website, and I think you can watch some of the presentations that have already taken place, and I think the one tomorrow night will probably be recorded as well for you to watch. There's some sheets and information in the back if you'd like to take those, just looking at 72-hour kits. It's one of the things, again, as a minimum, be prepared, have a plan. I think you guys get that, you know it, and be ready because we do have floodwaters, and we want to make sure that we have a plan in place, whether it be, I'm working personally with a bunch of different partners on a program called the Lighthouse Program, where we will teach you and help you know where to go up, not down, to get out of harm's way and not go into harm's way, especially with the flooding. Very different situation than a fire, where you may find yourself on the west side of I-25 if there were a flooding situation without some potential utilities, water, power, etc. And setting up all of our ham operators to be able to be connectors at those lighthouse areas where you can go to at least get information if necessary. So you guys, our hearts go out to you, just as Commissioner Clark said. So we're here for you.
Thank you. So again, definitely huge thanks again to the commissioners and to El Paso County for partnering with us and bringing us here and bringing this, again, insurance recovery related information. Again, it's a privilege for our United policyholders to be here and to provide this information. Again, our website, a tremendous source of free, consumer-friendly insurance recovery-related information. With that, I want to invite up one of your own, Ms. Carrie Olivier, who's going to give you a legislative update because there's been some progress in the last day. So she's very kindly offered to provide that to you tonight. So maybe just hold it.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. I really do want to thank Karen and United policyholders and Tom for persistently staying with us and being willing to wait until we were able to have them here to help us. I wish it was 8 months ago instead of starting now, but it's important, great information. And I also want to let you know that the county has let us know that they are recording this and it's going to be available through a link on their website. And we'll get an email out with that information so that you can review it or share it with other people. Excuse me. As far as the legislation goes, we do have cause to celebrate because we have had at least an almost victory. It's very close, just I think waiting for some final signatures of legislation that was started in Boulder after the Boulder fire, but was not successful last year. And we just had a Senate vote yesterday, and by a majority, the bill passed. It's not everything. It's not all retroactive. It's not going to solve our problems, but it's going to change things for the future. And we just want to ask you if you would take the time. We're going to be sending you a survey about your experience with your insurance providers. Just to take the time to fill that out when you get it, please, because that information from Boulder is what helped us get this legislation passed. And it's some of the things we've been able to get through this is a minimum of 365 days of ALE for anyone who suffers this sort of a total loss. And they will have to offer 24 months at the point of sale. Some people had far less than that. 365 days minimum to submit your contents inventory. Some of the people in our neighborhood had 180 days, can you imagine, with a total loss to submit all of your information. We also have in the bill in its current form 365 days after the expiration of ALE to replace and recover if you have a full replacement policy. So if you have 2 years of ALE, you would then have another full year to replace and repair. And as you know, we have maybe 10% of our lost houses up right now, and we're almost at a year. So to expect people to be able to replace and repair everything in a year is just not realistic in this sort of circumstance. And as of policies written in the beginning of this coming year, that won't be anymore. They will have to give a full 365 days following ALE. Policyholders who don't want to submit itemized inventories could choose to accept 30% of their contents limit or negotiate a higher amount. So if your insurer came to you and said, here's, I'll offer you 30% and you don't have to do a list, you can either accept that. I wouldn't necessarily think that's a good idea, but some people just can't do that process. You can negotiate a higher amount, but they at least set a limit in the bill, which is a lot better than nothing. Let's see here. I'm not going to address any further the statute of limitations issue because Tom covered that, but we are going to be asking our representatives, Sally and Peggy and others, to make sure that this bill gets signed by the governor in time so it has a chance to help us with regard to the suit against a statute of limitations. That would be big. We have to hope that happens. And then we also succeeded in killing a couple of provisions that the insurance lobby had written into the bill that would have caused us harm. So in just this short amount of time, with the momentum from the fires and with people taking the time to come, several people here took the time to come, even in the midst of what they're dealing with, and speak, we've made change positive for the future. So I think that's worth celebrating. Things are going to change. And I just want to encourage you to don't stop fighting for your recovery, and don't give up just because the insurance company is delaying or because it's difficult until you're ready to be done, and you're truly ready to be done. The people that persevere are the ones that get paid, and as United Policyholders has taught us, the squeaky wheels get the grease, and we're seeing that happen. So thank you.
I think that's an excellent point. Thank you, Carrie, for that. And you guys, honestly, you should be applauding for Carrie and your entire community. This is a significant step forward, this legislation. I mean, your groups combined with the other fire survivors, you guys have changed the face of the law in Colorado to make things better. This is a huge jump forward. Did you get everything you wanted? I know we were talking early. Nobody gets everything they wanted the first time. I mean, I remember when we were trying to get homeowners insurance reform in California after my fire, and we got some stuff, and we left it better than it was when we got it. And you guys have done the same. I'm really inspired, and just it is a moment of huge celebration. And just I'm going to conclude on this point before we move into our Q&A. You know, I agree with the adage, you know, persistence pays, and the squeaky wheel does get paid. But I would also encourage for all of you also to measure that against the knowledge that everybody's got a different tolerance level for this process. And nobody here has to justify to anybody else where their tolerance level is. And some people maybe settle out early, maybe they didn't get paid, quote unquote, everything. That's their choice. I would say as long as people have information so they can make a meaningful decision, that's always a good thing. But people have different tolerance levels, and sometimes when you've reached the end, you know you've reached the end. So, you know, get all the useful information you can possibly get, and then hold true to yourself and where your own personal tolerance level is. And it's, you know, just, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Everybody's tolerance level for the process is different. So be true to yourself and get as much meaningful, useful, pragmatic information to aid you in that decision making as you can, as many data points as you possibly can. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open us up to a Q&A. And so, Tom, if you want to come up with me, and you guys, if we can have you come up to the mics just so it would make it for the recording, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, and there's a light, thanks, Carrie. So there's a lights on a Navy BMW license plate 748ZKY. So if that's anybody's car, the lights are on, or so we hear. Thank you so much, Brian. Or Matt. Any questions? Come on down. The mics are open. We're going to share this. There we go. Put it right between us. I'm going to let you hold it because I think that's important. Is that on? Did you want, just use our microphone. Just use that so it'll at least get recorded for anybody who's watching this on tape.
Karen, I want to thank you and Tom very much. My name's Steve Price. This is a question for Tom. It's kind of three parts. Many folks have come to realize that they're underinsured for a variety of reasons, some of which include a reliance by the agents upon public records as opposed to simply going out and measuring a home, those kinds of things. Could you address the issue of underinsurance, because as many of us have come to find out, without adequate building or contents, or excuse me, coverage A, that has a trickle-down effect on everything else. Secondly, is maybe to address the issue of the liability of the carrier themselves and whether or not there is liability, because I've heard rumors that there is not under Colorado law. And then the third is whether or not you've seen success under claims against errors and omissions and the agents themselves.
Thanks, Steve. That's a good question.
Yes, thank you, Steve. That is a great question. In fact, it's a topic of a whole nother presentation that I sometimes give at United Policyholders' request. I wish I had a positive piece of advice to give you all. The unfortunate reality is that the law in Colorado is makes it exceedingly difficult for anyone to recover for an underinsurance situation. And the insurance company will always take the position that, and I include in this the agent, that you chose the amount of your coverage. They take that position all the time, and believe it or not, they most of the time succeed in that position. I can tell by the looks in your face that you have the same reaction as everyone else that I've ever said that to, which is, what? When did I ever pick the amount of my coverage? I didn't pick the amount of my coverage. I went to my insurance company when my wife and I bought our current home 12 years ago, and you knew how much the mortgage was going to be, and you wanted to go to closing, and you wanted to make sure that you had enough insurance such that the whole closing could take place, and you keep signing and signing and signing until your hand gets sore. And, okay, well, that looks like a fair amount. It's pretty close to what I paid for the house. So shouldn't that be what replacement cost is? Well, no, as unfortunately many of you know. And I wish, Steve, that I could tell you that this is the first time I've heard this. It's not. I heard it in 4 Mile Canyon. I've heard it in Lower North Fork. I hear it here. I hear it in High Park. It is a system-wide problem. And it is something that I urge you to address your legislators about. I know there is some very helpful pieces in the new piece of legislation, assuming again that Governor Hickenlooper signs it, that should take some steps toward alleviating that from being quite such a problem. Agents are really difficult to sue as well. You have to show that you had a quote-unquote special relationship with that agent, and there ain't much out there that qualifies as a special relationship. Being your neighbor, being your agent for 15 years, that, believe it or not, does not qualify as a special relationship. Your agent getting some percentage of your premium as what their payment is, a commission, that does not create a special relationship. If you paid that agent extra money over and above what your premium was to come out and look at your house, you're starting to get in the right direction of maybe being able to prove a special relationship. I will tell you that I have taken a case arising out of the 4 Mile Canyon fire against American Family, and in that situation, she had literally only about 60% insurance, even though she had replacement cost coverage. Even though the policy form, the basic form, said we will pay you replacement cost without any limits. But guess what? American Family was gracious enough to ramrod to her the Gold Star endorsement. Wow, doesn't that sound like a great thing? No, what the Gold Star endorsement did, among other things, was it capped your replacement cost and said you're not going to get any more than a particular dollar amount, which is what you all would know as your limit. And you can get up to 20% more, which is oftentimes what the agent will try to sell you on. Oh, don't worry about it. You've got plenty of coverage because you got this 20% kicker on here. Well, even with every single possible of the 20% and everything, all the other additional coverages for debris removal, and if you slot some coverage in a different place, then that allows you a little more coverage under the coverage A dwelling or what have you, she was still only had 60% coverage. She had gone to her agent a number of times over the course of probably about 15 years since she and her husband were raising their family in this house, and had periodically asked this agent, gee, is this enough coverage? It doesn't really sound to me like whatever the dollar amount was, like it's enough coverage. Oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, you're fine. You got that 20% kicker in the Gold Star endorsement. And we're in the middle of that litigation, and that I am free to say is going to be a challenging piece of litigation. One other thing that I will say, and major kudos to the people that assisted with the House Bill 1225, is that the right number? A year ago, I was asked to sit on a board or a commission study group to help the Division of Insurance try to rewrite some of their policyholder disclosure forms. And I came in and I had a 4 or 5 point, very succinct 4 or 5 points that I thought would be helpful to include in this disclosure form that outlined for people what their coverages were. In other words, replacement cost does not mean replacement. It might mean 60%, it might mean 75%, it might mean 80%. And so I very neatly spelled it out in bullet point form what the different levels of coverage were so that the consumer would have some comprehension, hopefully ahead of time, as to what this coverage was going to be. And I was in this room with two representatives of the Department of Insurance and about a dozen insurance representatives. And you would have thought I was a Martian, that I was the biggest heretic that had ever graced the planet Earth, the way that they reacted to that. Oh, our policyholders understand that replacement cost really is capped at the limit. And I said, well, excuse me, maybe I've got a self-selecting group of clients that come to me, but I can guarantee you that each and every one of you in this room have policyholders who don't understand that replacement cost doesn't really mean replacement cost. Oh, well, we treat our policyholders favorably, blah, blah, blah. And it was blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, my proposal, of course, didn't fly. It got flushed. But they did want to include in there similar language to, I believe, what Kerry and others were successful in beating back in this current piece of legislation, which is the insurance lobby wants it to be, what did I say at the beginning? It's the policyholder's choice how much coverage they get. Your problem, folks, is up till the point in time that you had a fire, you had no point of reference. You had no point of reference to be able to understand whether your $500,000 worth of coverage was remotely close to what it would cost to rebuild your home. And I think under the new piece of legislation, there is certainly some encouragement for insurance companies to do more on the front end to advise you that this may not be enough, whatever it is that they come up with in their double secret, way of formulating these things. Let me also say another couple of things. It's really important to fill out the surveys because the couple of bits I was able to get inserted into the disclosure form were as a result of a survey that United Policyholders had taken of survivors of the 4 Mile Canyon fire. And you can bet that this good piece of legislation that hopefully will be signed into law here soon by Governor Hickenlooper, the insurance industry has a very, very strong lobby. They are not going to take this sitting down. They are going to try the next legislative session. If they don't succeed then, it'll be the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that, to try to overturn some of these good pieces of law. And the most helpful type of data that we can have are these group-wide data where we can speak in broad terms of percentages. And we can say that only 10% had pulled building permits after the first year on the 1-year anniversary of the fire, of the Waldo Canyon fire. So tell me how that makes it fair that these people are precluded from coming back after 1 year and asking for additional funds. Tell me how it's fair that their personal property has to be replaced within 1 year when they don't even have a gosh darn place to put the personal property because their home isn't rebuilt yet. I could go on, but you get the point. Fill out those surveys. They will become really, really important in the future to beat back the next time the insurance lobby steps forward. One other point about the new piece of legislation, as Carrie indicated, at present, it will only apply on a prospective basis going forward, so your policies will not change with the exception, as it reads right now, with the exception of that 1-year suit limitation clause. Again, that may not be in there by the time the governor signs it. Should be, because the governor typically is not, the governor isn't the one who makes the law, the governor is the executive, he executes the laws. But there might still be some changes that happen to that law before it hits the governor's desk. So don't count on the 1-year suit, the extension being in there. Start advocating on your behalf already, as I said. But if it does get signed into law, then that 1-year suit limitation will not be there. But that's the only part of your policy that will change. The time frame for completing rebuilding, the time frame for completing the replacement of your personal property will not be changed by this piece of legislation. And maybe there's some more questions, but before any of that, I will encourage each and every one of you to be your own strongest advocate. Be the squeaky wheel. Go to your insurance company. Ask them politely to please respond to your questions. Don't assume that they're out there being the good hands people, because they're not. They're not. They might be good at paying lots of money to sponsor golf tournaments and other things, but they're not good about paying their policyholders money. And the only one that's going to, the very best advocate is you for yourself. So be the squeaky wheel. Sorry. Things keep, synapses are still firing here. If an adjuster or a supervisor tells you that it's this way because it is this way, or it's this way because that's the way we always do it, or it's this way because the policy says it, make them show you where in the policy it says that. I can almost guarantee you that at least half the time it's not in there, and they won't be able to show it to you. But make them show it to you. Oh, well, you have to, or I was speaking to one gentleman beforehand, and he said that the insurance company said, well, we're just not going to pay you anymore, so your next step is you have to go to mediation. Baloney. There's no requirement of mediation in any insurance policy. There might be in some commercial contracts or that type of thing, but not in an insurance policy. There might be an appraisal clause, which is a very different process than mediation. So make them show you in the policy where it says what they claim that it says. So sorry, I kind of went way beyond your question, but.
Any other questions? Yeah, this is on. Come on, Jan, if you could speak it into the mic just so it goes on. Thank you.
Do I use that? Or
Oh, you can use that one.
I think those are going now, Fred.
Yep.
Hi, folks. Hi, folks. My name's Don Meany. I'm a survivor from Parkside Mountain Shadows. One of the things that wasn't mentioned was, if you have a complaint, file it with Dora. I did. And interestingly enough, to what extent it's helpful or not, Dora replied back to me, said, we're referring your case to our internal investigative office and also referring your case to the Attorney General. Don't know where that will go, but secondarily, one, it puts the attention where it properly belongs with the insurance companies, and secondly, you can communicate to your legislative branch that if they were to ask for summary reports of what's been referred to the investigative offices or to the Attorney General, they'll get a whiff of the challenges policyholders have. So 1, file complaints. 2, inform your legislative branch that there's a database in the state of Colorado with which they can refer. Might be helpful in the future. May not help us, but it may help the folks that come behind us. That's all I have to say.
I could just build on that. I think that is an excellent point. Believe me, we have a whole nother roadmap presentation on dispute resolution mechanisms, and that's a key component. Like you said, there's many tools in your toolbox for various issues that arise, and definitely filing the complaint with DORA is definitely a tool in the toolbox that you can utilize. So thanks for shedding light on that and sharing that. Any other questions? Yeah.
We had to put together a estimate for landscaping, which on my policy was a separate coverage. And I noticed we were talking about decks and patios the other day, and I noticed on the cost breakdown of my house when they gave me the money plus the 25%, the deck wasn't included. Is a deck landscaping? Or did they miss something in the cost of the house?
Decks oftentimes can fall in a couple of different categories. If they're attached to the house, they can be considered dwelling. If they're detached, conceivably they could be considered under oftentimes which is coverage B, which is other structures. Sometimes they can be considered landscaping as well, although I don't typically see decks under the landscaping category. Use your insurance adjuster. Make them help you. Make them help you. Ask them, can you please help me understand this, because I don't understand this. And unfortunately, oftentimes they don't understand it very well either. But they are obligated, believe it or not, they're obligated to try to help you maximize your coverage. And so if there is a way to categorize that in such a way that it creates more coverage somewhere else for you, then they need to help you try to do that. Let me also chime in on the complaints to the Division of Insurance. Do that. And I was actually speaking with one of the attorneys general just last week, and he happens to be the one that that represents the Division of Insurance. And I was bemoaning to him the fact of having to proceed forward and file these complaints at the one-year anniversary of this Lower North Fork fire. And he said, really? Oh, you need to file complaints with the division, or have your clients file complaints with the Division of Insurance. And it does make a difference, and I think it is making a difference for you folks here, because I know I attended one of your rally meetings that you had in January, late January I think it was, where the Commissioner of Insurance was here, and a number of other representatives or elected officials were present, and I do think that that is making a difference for you folks. So again, that's part of being a squeaky wheel. Keep it up. Any others? Oh, here we go.
The appraisal process that you mentioned, my insurance company and my private adjuster have both recommended I proceed with that due to the large discrepancy in their claim versus the insurance company claim. I'm aware of how that process works. What are your thoughts on how does this usually go, or what are your thoughts on that process, and is this a good alternative?
Yeah, what the questioner asked is, in all of your policies, probably all of your policies, typically it's in the, again, in the general conditions section, there is something called appraisal. And don't confuse that with real estate appraisers and MAIs and that type of thing, because it's nothing of the sort. Appraisal is meant to be a dispute resolution mechanism built within the policy, and something that is self-executing upon either side requesting it. And it's supposed to provide for a rapid way of trying to resolve a dispute. You don't need a lawyer. A lawyer could be helpful, but you really don't need a lawyer to participate in that process. And the benefits of it are that you typically are going to get resolution of that discrepancy in what the insurance company believes that is a fair dollar and what you believe is a fair dollar, you're going to get resolution of that discrepancy typically within 30 to 90 days. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but typically that's about what it is. Once that appraisal process is completed, that firmly determines the, quote, amount of loss. Under the terms of the appraisal clause and the terms of a different clause within the policy, typically it's the what we will pay clause, it says that the insurance company will pay what the appraisers determine is the amount of loss. Briefly, the appraisal process commences as follows. Usually it's the policyholder who makes the request for appraisal, and then you designate an appraiser. Your appraiser oftentimes will be someone who already has familiarity with the process and with your property. Doesn't have to be, it can be somebody independent, but typically you are going to be better served if it's someone who already has familiarity with your property and the dollar amounts of your claim. And if you have the entirety, if you have disputes over not only the dwelling but the personal property and even the ALE or lost rents, you can include all those in the same appraisal. If you only have a dispute as to one of them, you can go through appraisal on that one, and then when another one comes up, you can go to a second appraisal. The insurance company will then designate an appraiser. And the insurance companies typically will designate someone who also already has some familiarity with your property. There was an insurance bulletin that was issued 2 or 3 years ago that says insurance companies are not supposed to designate someone as an appraiser that they have essentially in their hip pocket, because that is what they typically do. The key then becomes the neutral third, which is a party known as the umpire. 2 appraisers, one designated by each side, and the umpire. It's then really, it's a majority rule, so the umpire then tries to get agreement with him from one of the other 2, and that then determines the amount of the loss. In my experience, appraisals typically come out much more favorable to the policyholder than they do the insurance company. That's my experience. Each case is different, so I can't really make any promises to you that it will turn out that way. But I think most of the time, most people feel that they were fairly well served. Policyholders feel they were fairly well served by the appraisal process, mostly because it was able to proceed forward relatively quickly, and you're also not having to pay someone like me a boatload of money, whether it's an hourly basis or a contingent fee. So most of the time it does turn out better for the policyholder, and the insurance company is ordered to pay additional sums.
Also, just note to self, you guys, the United Policyholders website that I mentioned multiple times earlier, we have a tip sheet, a publication all about appraisal, explaining it. It's got a graph showing you how these different, how the process works. It's like a flow chart, as well as explaining pros and cons of the process. I'll also add that in our Larimer County High Park Roadmap to Recovery program in January, we did a whole program on dispute resolution mechanism, and one section of that program was on appraisal. You did a great overview. We actually had somebody who served as an appraiser and an umpire give his perspective on the process, and those videos are online at the Larimer County website. So not only, so that was our dispute resolution, and that was a piece of it. So just as another informational resource, I also might add you did a great job very quickly giving that overview on underinsurance. Tom did speak at length on underinsurance as part of that roadmap program, and that was the late August roadmap to recovery in Fort Collins. So again, if you go to the County of Larimer, if that's an issue of particular interest to you or what's going on in your own particular claim, you can watch the expanded version of that on the Larimer County website if that's of interest to you.
Let me say one more thing about the appraisal process, which is if you have a total loss, it works it typically works very well. If you have a partial loss and you're in disputes with the insurance company over how much damage there was and the extent of the damage, more than likely you will run up against some pretty significant pushback from the insurance company on whether that is a claim that is subject to appraisal. And we call that scope, which is how much was damaged as a result of this fire. And insurance companies, much more so in the last 2-3 years, have aggressively taken positions that scope is not subject to appraisal. meaning, and I argue with them. I say, well, what do you mean? To me, it has to do with how much money are you writing a check for, because disputes are about what is subject to appraisal are disputes over the amount of loss. And I tell them, well, amount of loss connotes to me that you're getting out a check and writing a check, so if we're arguing over how much money is filled in the dollar section there, that's over amount of loss. And they take the position that no, it's only whether what they're offering to pay is fair for what everyone can see was the damage. Yes. So still give it a try. Some insurance companies will still agree that scope questions can go to appraisal, but the big ones typically do not.
You can come on down to the mic if you're, thanks.
I have a partial loss question. My concern is related to windows and seal failures over time. Some of our windows have obvious seal failures. Others do not show the hazing, etc. I've agreed to meet with the insurance company and their structural engineer, and I wanted to get guidance and with the 1-year deadline coming up, for filing a suit. Wanted to get guidance with respect to possibly hiring my own structural engineer, meeting with the insurance company, and getting agreement on a short-term plan and long-term plan going forward with respect to specifically windows, but I can see how this may apply to ceiling tiles, stucco, etc. But I just wanted to get guidance on what you'd suggest in terms of possibly hiring an objective structural engineer.
I would strongly urge any of you and all of you, if you are in a dispute with the insurance company and they have an expert that they bring down that they claim is independent, that you have your own expert. If you can afford it, you need to fight fire. Sorry, bad analogy, but fight fire with fire. If they have an expert engineer, you're far better off if you have an expert engineer. You need an expert engineer to be able to come in and say that those window seals failed, or whatever the damage may be, failed more probably than not as a result of this fire. Because you can bet that the insurance company's expert is going to say, oh, no, 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 no. Those windows were old, or those windows have been the subject of a recall from many years ago, or whatever they may be, or they had southern exposure, so the windows were going to dry out and the seals were going to break anyway. Whatever it may be, even though every time the wind blew before, guess what? You didn't have little bits of dust particles or snow blowing through your window, and now you do. So you need an expert. And absolutely go hire an expert. And your point kind of illustrates a good basis good grounds to ask for an extension, which is, hey, we're still trying to figure this out, Mr. Insurance Company and me. You're going to bring an expert down, I'm going to have an expert there, and we're scheduling this meeting as quickly as we can, but it's not going to happen until May 1st. The experts will each need to have some time to be able to generate their reports and exchange and talk amongst themselves to try to figure that out. So that is an excellent basis to ask for an extension. Let me also say that when the other side has their expert out there, if you can, get your own expert out there. Why? It's been my experience that experts tend to drop their guard when they're around one of their brethren. And if you have a professional engineer as out, and frankly, these guys may know each other, they may not, but they may kind of, again, they let down their guard. Whereas if it's the adjuster who's shadowing his expert everywhere they go, you're never going to have a chance to really figure out what that expert is thinking. And coach your expert. Coach your expert to advocate for whatever he or she believes that they are seeing and why they think that this is a result of the fire.
Can I add on that, Tom? also, again, anytime you're hiring an expert like that, either to do a scope of loss or a structural, for somebody who's got a total, or like you said, a structural engineer, a certain specialist on a particular part on a partial, be sure to clarify their extent of services. Is it just the preparation of the report, or is it preparation of the report plus perhaps interacting with the insurance company or the insurance company's expert on your behalf? Previous fire survivors have run into, I don't want to say trouble, yeah, I will say trouble, but there's been an ambiguity. They paid a lot of money for a report, but that didn't include the time and effort to then maybe have some interaction or to educate you. I was a total loss, as you saw from the picture. My husband and I did actually, because we were in we got lowballed by our insurance company, so we hired a professional company to do an independent scope of loss. They not only prepared the scope of loss, but they educated us about how to argue that scope of loss and what that scope of loss meant. And I think that education was one of the critical aspects of us being able to move through that claims resolution process. So again, just clarify extent of services, and remember, not only get an expert, but really you want the most credible expert that you can. The strong, are they credentialed? What are their licensing? What is the education? So in a situation like this with so many homes down, sometimes you might get somebody just like, oh, I'm an expert. Really, what is their training? Because the more credible your documentation, be it an expert report or otherwise, the more likely you're going to be able to negotiate a better result with it. But clarify extent of services.
Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, my name is Chris Carlson. I had total loss. I have settled coverage A and various things, but I'm dealing now with code upgrades. And these aren't my figures. I've just made up some figures that would be proportional, the same. So let's assume I had $200,000 in insurance for coverage A, and with 1.25%, it was $250,000. The insurance company, through their valuation, would have come back with $265,000 as the value of the house I needed to replace. So I was short for my coverage A, which was 1.25%. So the policy reads, you may use up to 10% of the limit of liability that applies to coverage A for the increased costs you incur due to the enforcement of any ordinance or law which requires or regulates, and then they have various other things. My assumption from that is that you can use coverage A plus the code amount if you're trying to rebuild your house. And say I want to rebuild the house at $265,000 because that's their valuation. That's another $15,000 beyond what I'm getting, so I want to tap part of the code. I went back and forth several months. I was asked to get all this detail, which I did. I spent 3 different 4-hour meetings with my builder, spent all kinds of time down at the building department, had help down there, gave the insurance company more detail than they had ever seen about what codes were required. And since my figures aren't anywhere near what I was handing you here, but we had $65,000 worth of code upgrades. Then the latest I got back from the adjuster was that, well, no, your valuation report included code upgrades there. And I said, well, okay, but if my insurance maxes out below that, it seems like I should be able to tap this ordinance and law. Well, no, we're still looking. So we've gone, I finally have asked them for a line. I had 32 items of code upgrades that we sent in. I asked them to give me line by line which ones they're honoring, which they weren't. I know many of them they couldn't have included because they weren't in effect yet. And so I just would like you to talk a little bit about code upgrades and them actually paying out.
Good question. Code upgrades are a major, major issue with many, many insurance companies. And how do you go about accessing that coverage, and how do you go about triggering that coverage? First, let me tell you that in spite of what many insurance policies may say in the exclusions part of the policy, code upgrades under Colorado law are to be part of your replacement cost coverage. If you, in other words, if you get replacement cost, and there's a case called Allstate versus Dupree, D-U-P-R-E, where the insurance company said, well, we have a code upgrade exclusion, we don't owe for code upgrades, and turned out that this person was unable to rebuild their home because it was a very, very old home. And so it was, the codes were way out of date. And the insurance company had offered replacement cost coverage. And the building department was never going to grant her a building permit to rebuild what was there before because it wasn't going to be code compliant. And so the insurance company was going to get off the hook by only paying actual cash value and was never going to have to pay the depreciation holdback or the difference between the replacement cost and the actual cash value. That case went all the way through up to, I think it's a Court of Appeals decision, although it could be a Supreme Court decision. And the whichever court it was said, no, if you paid for replacement cost coverage and you can't replace your home because of these code upgrades, Mr. Insurance Company, you don't get to skate on the difference between the replacement cost and the actual cash value just because this person can never go back and put back that house that was there before. And the distinction is it's called, this was replacement cost, not reproduction cost, reproduction being reproducing what was there before. Now, in terms of accessing that coverage, it is highly, highly dependent on the exact verbiage of the policy, and I would really have to read the policy cover to cover before I could give you much of an educated opinion as to what you need to do. What it essentially is going to boil down to is that additional kicker for up to 10% or whatever it may be that can be spent for ordinance and law, can that be, or is that subject to the limit or not subject to the limit? If it's an additional coverage, then it should not be subject to the limit. But, and I would also look to see whether or not there's verbiage kind of hanging around at the end of that whole paragraph that says something to the effect of, and this coverage is still subject to all of the other policy provisions that are set forth elsewhere in the policy. But again, if it's an additional coverage, then you may have an argument that they owe that over and above what the policy limit is. If it's subject to that limit, then you're probably going to have a tough time trying to access any additional coverage on top of that.
It's clear. It says this coverage is additional insurance.
Well, that would be my first argument, which is it's additional insurance. I know a good lawyer. Carrie? No.
In looking through, oh, this doesn't work, is it?
Should.
Okay, thank you. In helping a friend with her total loss, we discovered a couple of things that have been useful, and I just wanted to ask you to address that. One is the fact that in our neighborhood, most people were very underinsured, really in everything, but particularly landscaping. And we found that it was within the policy, actually through the help of United Policyholders in part, to use the other structures coverage for many things that would normally be considered landscaping, and that the adjusters never sort of share that information with you, like sprinkler systems or fencing or rock retaining walls or planting beds or electric dog fences or things like that. And I just wanted to get your comment back as to whether that was standard and could usually successfully be argued. And then the second one is on absorbing the deductible when you reach policy limits. Whether most insurance companies will do that, and if it's worth asking them to do that.
Sure, it's certainly worth asking the insurance company to do that. It's always worth asking an insurance company to do anything that you can that's going to assist you. And I believe most insurance companies will agree to waive the deductible if your loss exceeds the policy limits. It may be they're going to take the deductible early on, but then they might agree to waive it as you get ready to pop the limit. Let's see, on the landscaping and coverage B, absolutely bring that to their attention. What you will find is that sometimes there is verbiage within their description of coverage B that talks about garages or detached garages, fencing, and that type of thing, and just say, gee, it strikes me that that ought to apply to my landscaping, and particularly landscaping where there's some kind of improvements to the property, such as retaining walls, sprinkler systems, and that type of thing. So absolutely ask the insurance company. To be candid, I have not had a lot of experience trying to deal with those types of issues with insurance companies, mostly because the landscaping is usually, somewhat of a smaller dollar item, and in the mass losses, oftentimes the other structure's limit's going to be hit anyway. But absolutely, give that a shot. It's always worth trying, and an excellent point, Carrie. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Masami, and I have a question about mediation that you mentioned. My insurance company is asking in their letter saying, upon the inspection of the re-inspection of the damage, if you and we fail to agree on any loss of damage, we would agree to mediate disputed issues with you through an impartial mediator. And I did check the policy, and like you said, there's an appraisal clause, but we can't be in appraisal because we don't agree with the scope at all. So they're asking for mediator, which you said is not in our contract. So how do we deal with that?
Well, that's strictly voluntary. They may make you feel like that's your only other option, but it's not. You can always, file a lawsuit, or you can still ask to go to appraisal, but they'll deny the request to go to appraisal. So but mediation is not something typically that is provided for in the policy. They can offer that to you. You can agree to accept to go to mediation. Most of the time, at least the mediations I go to are voluntary. There's no requirement that by the time you walk out of there that you have to have an agreement. It's like any kind of a negotiation, and not to demean the process, but it's like going and trying to buy a car. Dealer starts high, you start low, you go back and forth, 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 and at the end of the day, if the dealer isn't at a dollar that you are willing to accept, then guess what? You're not buying that car, and you're not accepting whatever it is that they're willing to offer. If they will agree to pay for the mediator, mediators can be very expensive, but if they will agree to pay for the mediator, why not give it a shot, see what they're willing to offer. So
we don't have to take anything that was offered in mediation if it's not to our favor.
Mediation is voluntary, so no, you do not have to accept what they are offering.
Can I add a couple things on that? And again, UP's got a great tip sheet on this. It's part of our dispute resolution tip sheet. Also, part of that dispute resolution program I told you earlier about in County of Larimer in January, there's a whole section on mediation. A couple of key things about mediation, just if you do elect to go, make sure you prepare. Don't just walk in cold. Prepare, prepare, prepare if you want to have an effective mediation, and also make sure that whoever's representing the insurance company has authority to settle the claim to the dollar amount that you want settled. It's, you want to make sure if you're going to go through that process that whoever is being sent on behalf of the insurance company to participate in that mediation has the authority to settle to that dollar amount, all right? So again, you don't want to go through that process of preparation, getting all your documents ready, going through all your document review, and then you get there, you spend all day going back and forth, and the person who's been sent there doesn't even have the dollar authority to settle your claim. So those are just a couple of tips. Check our website for, again, dispute resolution mechanisms. We have a search engine on the UP website. It's a little Google search bar, so even if you just enter in mediation, the different publications that deal with that process will come up, so you can access them really easily.
And let me also offer that if any of you want to give me a call, and like any good lawyer, I've got a fistful of business cards here, give me a call and run a name by me of a mediator that the insurance company is proposing. I'm happy to give you my take if I know him or her. And as Karen suggests, go into the mediation prepared. The insurance company may or may not be prepared, but go into it prepared. The statistics are that about 97% of civil cases settle. And that's consistent with my practice. Only about 3% of them actually end up in trial. And you know, I went to law school to be a trial lawyer, so I enjoy the trial part. But what do you think I do on 97% of my cases? You settle, which means a lot of those settle at mediations. And so I spent a lot of time getting ready for mediations and what is in my mediation statement that goes to the mediator, which is advocating in a non-aggressive manner to that mediator, setting forth and articulating as clearly as I possibly can why my client deserves the money that I'm asking for. And I have exhibits that are tabbed behind it. I would have before and after pictures. I would have costs of repair. I would have, if you have an expert report on your own, which again I strongly encourage you to have, I would definitely make reference to that and make some reference to why what the insurance company has been presenting you is not the full truth. But don't spend your entire time complaining about what the insurance company has done to you. Advocate for yourself. Don't spend all your time bemoaning why the insurance company is treating you unfairly. Doesn't mean you ignore it, but don't spend all your time focused on that.
You know what, I see that we are at 8:30, which is the end of our time. Did you want to make a quick announcement, Peggy?
Well, you kind of listed a few things. Is there a list that they can actually download or that they can access on how to be prepared, what that looks like?
Literally, if you go to the UP website, there's definitely a tip sheet that talks about mediation, and again, too, as part of our Roadmap to Recovery High Park, we did have a portion of the presentation. We did a whole, it was our January meeting, is my recollection, January of this year, on dispute resolution mechanisms, of which mediation is one. Arbitration, appraisal, negotiation, litigation, those are all dispute resolution mechanisms. They're different tools in your toolbox. And so again, if you want to watch a full presentation, a full roadmap just dedicated to that topic, it was my recollection January meeting of this year, and that is on the County of Larimer website. And again, our tip sheet about, again, how to prepare, that was an excellent point, Peggy, about how to prepare the things that they should be doing. Again, just if you go into the Google search bar on the UP website and put in mediation, our different publications that deal with that, including prep, tips, will all be on there. I see that we're after 8:30, and time is precious for you guys. I mean, I've got no place to be tonight. I'm not going back to San Diego till tomorrow, but I think what I'm going to do is, we went into our breakout session, so I'm just going to run over that with the Q&A, but I'm happy to stay afterwards. Do you have a few minutes to stay afterwards for anybody who has questions? And I'd just like to say, you guys, congratulations on your legislative reform. It's an amazing accomplishment of your wildfire survivor community. And again, the 1 year's approaching the end. You know, there is an end point. I can personally attest to that. So hold on and hold on together. I think that's going to be one of your best strategies. And I hope the presentation this evening has been useful. Have a good night, and we'll stay afterwards individually one-on-one.